Moving to a new country is like deleting your contacts list in real life. No friends, no family, no social safety net. Just me, two overstuffed suitcases, a foreign SIM card, and way too many assumptions about how quickly I'd adjust. The only person I vaguely knew in this city was Ryan. We'd both been hired by the same marketing firm, started training remotely at the same time, and exchanged a few Slack messages during onboarding. I remembered him being dry, funny in a sarcastic way, and probably a little smarter than me. We had a couple of Zoom calls together before the move, but that was it. He was just a username and a face in a little box until the day we both landed in Madrid, 4 days before our new job officially started. He messaged me that afternoon. Ryan. Landed, jet-lagged, starving, you around? I'd just finished shoving some frozen pasta into my tiny Airbnb microwave. I replied, me. Come over, 3rd floor, Buzz 3B. Hope you like bad Italian food. 15 minutes later, he was sitting at my wobbly IKEA table, hair messy from the flight, eyes a little bloodshot. He wore a dark hoodie and joggers, and even though he looked exhausted, he had that same dry smile from our Zoom calls. "This pasta's not bad," he said, chewing slowly. "It's terrible," I laughed. "Welcome to Spain." From that day on, it was just us. Every errand, every mishap, every awkward conversation in butchered Spanish, we tackled it together. Two freshly transplanted Americans clinging to the only familiar thing in sight, each other. Our apartments ended up being walking distance apart. I lived above a noisy cafe that smelled like burnt espresso and fresh bread. Ryan's building was quieter, tucked on a street where everything looked vaguely beige and sun-washed. The city was loud, fast, beautiful, and absolutely overwhelming. He was the only person I could text without Google Translate. We weren't instant best friends, not exactly. It was more like we just kept showing up for each other. Groceries, coffee runs, setting up bank accounts. It was practical at first. Convenient. But then, one night, 2 weeks in, everything started to feel different. It was a Sunday. We'd spent the day trying to find real Mexican food. Spoiler, we failed, and ended up drinking canned sangria on the steps of some old monument neither of us could pronounce. "You think this was a mistake?" Ryan asked suddenly. Head leaned back, eyes on the darkening sky. I shrugged. "I don't know. Probably." He chuckled softly. "You're supposed to say no. Give me hope." "Okay," I said. "No. This was the best decision you've ever made. And now you get to eat microwave lasagna with me 3 times a week." He looked over, smirking. "So I moved halfway around the world to be your pity friend?" I grinned. "Technically, I was your pity invite. I'm just better at pretending I have it all together." His smile faded just slightly, but he didn't look away. "You do seem like you're handling this better," I almost laughed. "Ryan, I cried in a supermarket last Tuesday because I couldn't find peanut butter." That got him. He burst out laughing, leaning into me for balance. His arm bumped mine and didn't move away. For a moment, it felt like we weren't alone anymore. Later that night, he didn't go home. We were watching some trashy Spanish reality show on Netflix with subtitles that barely made sense. I stretched out on the couch. He lay on the floor, head propped against a throw pillow, and somewhere between episode 2 and 3, we both stopped talking. I looked down and saw him staring at the ceiling, his face soft in the glow of my cheap floor lamp. He didn't look tired. He looked present. Still. "You okay?" I asked quietly. He nodded, then after a pause said, "I don't really want to go back to my place." I sat up. "You don't have to." Ryan turned his head, looking at me. "Seriously?" "Yeah," I said, voice soft. "Stay." He stayed. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in my bed while he took the couch, listening to the quiet rustling of sheets, the occasional creak of old wood under shifting weight. It felt like something had changed, like the space between us had gotten smaller. I didn't know what it meant yet, I just knew I didn't feel so alone anymore. The next morning I woke up to the sound of my kettle whistling. That was weird, because I hadn't turned it on. I walked out of my room, rubbing my eyes, and found Ryan standing barefoot in my kitchen, stirring sugar into 2 mugs. "Hope you don't mind," he said, not looking at me. You were out cold. Figured I'd make myself useful. By boiling water? I asked, yawning. For your terrible instant coffee, he replied, handing me a mug. You're welcome. It was the most domestic moment I'd had with anyone in years. He didn't rush to leave. He stayed as I got ready for the day, even sat on the edge of the tub while I brushed my teeth, making fun of my toothpaste brand. Then we walked to the office together, pretending not to notice the way people glanced at us in the elevator like we were already a couple. We weren't. Of course we weren't. But something had shifted. From that point on, everything felt a little closer, more casual, in ways that didn't feel casual. He stopped knocking when he came over. He started leaving a hoodie or charger behind without asking. I'd find his phone on my nightstand, even when he hadn't spent the night. It was like our lives started to blur without either of us naming it. It wasn't like we were sleeping together, or even touching in that way. But the space between us, physically, emotionally, kept shrinking. One night, after another long day at work and a disappointing takeout order, I caught myself staring at him while he scrolled through his phone on my couch. He looked tired, comfortable, familiar. You ever think we're kind of pretending to be in a relationship? I asked suddenly. He raised an eyebrow. Because I made you coffee? Because we do everything together. Because I haven't had a real conversation with anyone else in 3 weeks. He leaned back, considering. So what are we then? Roommates who don't live together? Codependent expats with matching Wi-Fi passwords? Ryan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. You think that's all this is? I didn't know how to answer that. He shifted on the couch, turning to face me more directly. Because if you're saying this is fake, then I must be imagining things. Like what? I asked. Like the way you look at me sometimes. Like last week, when we were at that rooftop bar and you leaned in to say something and then forgot what you were going to say. I froze. I remembered that exact moment. I remembered what I was going to say too, but I'd chickened out. He kept going. Or how you always offer me the bed when I crash here, even though you hate sleeping on the couch. You notice that? I notice a lot. The room went quiet. The low hum of the fridge and the distant sound of traffic outside were the only things cutting through the tension. I'm not pretending, I said finally. Me neither, he replied. He didn't go home that night either. But he didn't stay on the couch either. We didn't kiss. We didn't do anything, really. Just lay there, fully clothed, under the same blanket. His arm barely touched mine, but it felt like every nerve ending in my body was tuned to that single point of contact. Around 2 a.m., he whispered, Do you think this is going somewhere? I think it already is, I whispered back. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that when I woke up, I didn't want him to leave. The weirdest part wasn't the sleeping arrangement. It was how normal it felt after. We didn't talk about it the next morning. He just got up, stretched, brushed his teeth with my spare toothbrush, and started frying eggs in my tiny kitchen like this had always been our routine. When I handed him a mug of coffee, he grinned. See? Now we're even. That weekend, we hit the Sunday flea market. He bought a chipped ceramic ashtray shaped like a bull's head. I bought a €5 jacket that smelled like a stranger's attic. We laughed way too much, got sunburned, and split a cold beer while watching a street performer dance like his rent depended on it. At one point, I snapped a picture of Ryan laughing mid-bite of his sandwich. He caught me. Delete that, he said. Never, I replied. He didn't press it. In fact, a few hours later, he asked me to send it to him. But then things started getting murky. One night, after he'd stayed over again, he was standing in the doorway of my room getting dressed for work. I sat up, watching him pull his hoodie on. You staying at your place tonight? He paused for a second too long. Yeah. I should. Right, I said, trying to keep my tone light. He didn't look at me when he added, But maybe you can come over after work? I nodded. Sure. But I felt it, that flicker of something unsettled in his voice, that slight hesitation. It was starting to feel like we were orbiting each other with no idea what direction we were heading in. Like we'd built this quiet little life together without ever agreeing what it was. I didn't want to ask too much. or want too much. I wasn't sure I could handle it if he pulled away, but it was too late. I already had too much to lose. The thing about living abroad is you start to crave anything familiar, even if it's complicated. A song in English playing at the supermarket. The smell of fast food that reminds you of high school. An accent that sounds like your own. Or a guy who's crashed on your couch so many times that you forget he has his own bed. Ryan and I had settled into something that looked a lot like a relationship. But since neither of us had said it out loud, we just kept pretending it was something else, something safer, until it wasn't. It started with a Tuesday. I know, that sounds like nothing. But Tuesday was our night. Unofficially. We'd cook together, usually in my place, because my kitchen had the better pans and fewer ants. We'd try some local wine that was always too dry or too sweet, and we'd fall asleep on the couch halfway through some Netflix documentary about art theft or cults. But that Tuesday, he didn't show. He texted me around 8. Ryan, sorry, stuck at drinks with some coworkers. Rain check? I stared at the message for a while, not because I was angry. At least, not at first, but because it didn't feel like him. Not the Ryan I'd been getting to know these past few months. I typed all good and sent it. Then I turned off the lights, didn't eat dinner, and lay on the couch in the dark until I fell asleep. The next day at work, he acted like nothing had happened. I watched him from across the office, the way he laughed with our coworkers, tossing out jokes like he always did, smiling that easy smile. But I felt something tighten in my chest, like I'd missed something obvious. That night, he didn't text, so I didn't either. 3 days passed. We'd gone from daily contact, calls, texts, dropping by each other's place without warning, to silence. A quiet, awful silence that made everything feel colder. On Friday, I caved. I walked to his apartment. I didn't even warn him, just showed up and buzzed his place like we used to do when things weren't so weird. He opened the door in sweatpants, holding a mug, his hair messy. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he echoed, but there was something guarded in his voice, like a wall had gone up. I didn't know how to scale. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside. "Yeah, sure." I walked in. The air smelled like sage and laundry detergent. His living room was the same mix of organized and chaotic blankets draped over the back of the couch, books in little piles, his laptop open on the coffee table. I sat down. He sat across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. "You've been quiet," I said. "So have you." "I didn't want to push," Ryan exhaled, like he'd been holding something in. "It got too real. I don't know. I think I panicked." I nodded slowly, the pit in my stomach settling in. "What do you mean? Too real?" "This," he gestured between us. "Whatever this is, it's more than I thought it would be. You say that like it's a bad thing." "It's not," he said quickly. "That's the problem." That sentence hit harder than I expected. I stared at him, trying to piece together the edges of what he was saying without making it hurt more. "So you like this, but it scares you?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I've never really, I don't know if I'm into guys, okay? Like I haven't had this before. But then we got here and it just happened. Being around you, it felt easy. And I let it happen. But now I'm terrified I'll screw it up. Or worse, you'll think I was just using you because I'm lonely." My throat went tight. I swallowed. "Were you?" He looked straight at me. "No, I wasn't." I leaned back, letting that sit. "I just needed to hear you say that," I admitted. "I get it," he said. "I'd probably be asking the same thing." The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was necessary, like we were both digging through the rubble of something fragile to see what was still intact. Then, softly, he asked, "Can I still come over on Tuesdays?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Only if you bring dessert." That night, we didn't pretend. We watched something dumb and didn't even finish it. We curled up on the couch the way we always had, but this time his hand stayed on my thigh, his head leaned into my shoulder. It wasn't a declaration, it wasn't dramatic, it was just honest. And that felt like a beginning. From the outside, nothing looked different. We still went to work, still hung out on weekends, still tried new bars, and got lost on side streets, trying to find shortcuts we were convinced existed. We still talked every day. Ate dinner together at least 3 times a week. Made each other playlists. Shared groceries. Shared headaches. But something had shifted. Now, when we said goodnight, there was a pause. An extra beat where one of us would linger in the doorway or the stairwell, like waiting for permission to close the distance. And when we touched, it didn't feel casual anymore. It felt chosen. One night, I was making pasta in my tiny kitchen, sauce from scratch, the way he liked it, and Ryan walked up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He didn't say anything, just rested his chin on my shoulder while I stirred the sauce. That small moment undid me more than anything physical ever could. I stood there, wooden spoon in hand, heart thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just let myself feel what I'd been holding back for weeks. Wanting him didn't scare me anymore. But losing him? That did. About a week later, we were at this small local bar down by the river, one of those places that looked like it had existed long before TripAdvisor ever found it. It was loud, full of locals, and smelled like citrus and cheap beer. We sat outside under a string of warm lights, half tipsy, legs brushing under the tiny table. At some point, he looked at me and said, "You know I never expected it to be you." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, a little embarrassed. "Back in New York, during those early Zoom meetings, I remember thinking you were funny, but kind of intense. You always looked like you were trying to figure people out." "I probably was," I admitted. "I didn't think you liked me." "I didn't know you," he said, "but I wanted to." I took a slow sip of my drink to cover the way my heart jumped. He went on. "When I got the job offer and saw your name in the relocation email, it was the first time the whole move felt real. Like, okay, at least I know one person." I looked at him. "And now?" He glanced away for a second, then back at me. "Now, I don't want to imagine this without you." It hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. That quiet admission, that simple truth. I reached across the table and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. "You're not going to have to," I said. But nothing ever stays simple, especially not feelings. The next week, Ryan's team lead pulled him aside after a meeting. I didn't think anything of it at first. People get side conversations all the time. But later that night, when he came over, he was quiet, nervous energy vibrating under his skin. I closed my laptop, watching him fidget with the edge of my couch cushion. "You're doing that thing where you don't say what's bothering you," he sighed. "They offered me something." "What kind of something?" He looked up at me. "A position. Full-time. Bigger title. More money." My stomach twisted. "That's great, right?" "In Berlin." I stared at him. "Oh." He nodded slowly. "They want an answer by the end of the month." The silence between us wasn't peaceful this time. It was jagged, full of things neither of us wanted to ask. Finally, I said, "Are you thinking about it?" "Of course I'm thinking about it." He snapped, then softened. "It's a great opportunity, but also, I didn't plan on any of this. You and me. This." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "So what are you saying?" "I don't know," he said quietly. "I don't want to be the guy who bails when things get real." "You wouldn't be bailing." He looked at me, eyes tired. "Then what would I be?" I didn't have a clean answer. We didn't talk much the rest of that night. He stayed over, but it was different. We lay in bed like two people, holding something fragile between us, afraid to move too much in case it shattered. The next morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving. Said he'd call later. But I knew that look, that I need space look, and I hated how familiar it felt. The week that followed was quiet in all the wrong ways. Ryan didn't text as much. I didn't push. Maybe I should have. But something about the way he'd said I didn't plan on this kept echoing in my head like a warning. I knew what it meant. It meant this wasn't part of his story. That whatever we'd built here, whatever late-night confessions and slow mornings, and shared toothbrushes we'd drifted into was still something he could walk away from. I couldn't blame him. Not really. If someone had offered me a job like that 6 months ago, I'd have jumped at it too. But it didn't make it hurt less. On Thursday, I ran into him at the office kitchen. He was pouring coffee, back turned, and I almost walked away. But he must have heard me, because he said without turning around, "Hey." I hovered awkwardly in the doorway. "Hey." He finally looked at me. His eyes were tired. He hadn't shaved in a few days, and the slight shadows under his eyes made him look older than usual. "I've been meaning to call," he said. "Yeah," I said. "I figured. I've been thinking." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't say anything yet. Just come over tonight, okay?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, okay." He showed up around 9 p.m., holding a bag of takeout. We didn't talk much while we ate. I had music playing low in the background, some random acoustic playlist that suddenly felt too sentimental for the moment. When we were done, he stood in the middle of my living room, looking at me like he wanted to say something and didn't know how. "I've made a mess of this," he finally said. "You haven't," I replied, standing too. "You've just got choices now." "Yeah, but they feel like ultimatums." "They're not." He rubbed the back of his neck. "If I stay, am I staying for you?" "I don't want to be your reason not to leave," I said. "But I also don't want to be the thing you regret walking away from." He looked at me, eyes sharp, voice low. "And what if I stay, and this doesn't work?" "What if it does?" I asked. "What if this is already working, and we're just too scared to call it what it is?" He didn't respond. Not right away. So I kept going. "Look, you're not just someone I hang out with anymore, Ryan. I wait for your texts. I remember how you take your coffee. I know the dumb face you make when you're lying about liking a restaurant just because I picked it. You matter to me in a way I wasn't ready for." His breath hitched. I stepped closer. "I didn't move here to fall in love. I came here because I needed a job. But now, if you go, that's what it's going to feel like. Like I lost something I didn't know I was allowed to have." Still no response. Just this heavy, devastating quiet. Then he kissed me. No hesitation, no build-up. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't even dramatic. It was honest. Gentle. Slow. Like he was letting go of the last thing holding him back. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. I could feel his breath on my lips. "I don't want to wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed," he whispered. "So don't." He nodded, barely, like he was still figuring it out. But he stayed the night, and this time there were no questions between us. Just touch, just breath, just two people who were finally in the same place. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. He was in the kitchen, shirtless, humming something under his breath, like it was just any other morning. Maybe it was. Maybe this was the start of what normal looked like, for us. I leaned in the doorway, watching him. He turned, saw me, and smiled. Hey. And I thought, maybe we're not pretending anymore. We didn't make it official. Not really. There was no talk of labels, no midnight Facebook relationship status update, no whispered, boyfriend exchanged in bed. But things changed. Quietly, steadily, like water shaping stone. He started keeping a toothbrush at my place, then socks. Then one day he showed up with a drawer organizer and just claimed a whole section of my wardrobe without asking. "I figured it'd make things easier," he said, like that was a normal thing to do. But the truth was, it did. It made everything feel easier. We fell into a rhythm that didn't need words to explain. Weekdays were for work, walks home, making dinner together, trading off who picked the playlist. Weekends were for street markets, getting lost on purpose, and lying on the couch with limbs tangled like it was our right. One Friday night, we went to this little tapas place down near Malasaña. It had candles and old wine bottles and music just loud enough that we had to lean close to hear each other. I remember looking at him across the table, the light catching in the curve of his cheekbone, the way he absent-mindedly dipped a piece of bread into the sauce on my plate without asking. He caught me staring and grinned. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "You just look really Spanish tonight." He laughed. "That's not a thing." "It is now." He raised an eyebrow. "You saying I look hot?" "I'm saying I've thought about throwing you against a wall since the first date we never went on." He leaned in, voice lower. "Then maybe we should finally have one." That night, back at my place, we did what we always did. We kissed. Slowly. Deeply. Like we didn't have anywhere to be except here. But this time, something felt different. There was a kind of reverence to it. Not just hunger. Like we were touching something sacred. I'd never felt so known before. Every small movement, every pause, every whispered breath felt tuned to me. We didn't rush it. We didn't need to. After, we lay in bed, our bodies close, our hands still intertwined like they weren't ready to separate yet. He looked at me and said, "I'm not going to Berlin." I blinked. "What?" He took a breath. "I told them no this morning. Before work." I stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to do it for me," he said. "Not because you were watching, but because I knew what I wanted." "And you're sure?" He nodded. "This," he squeezed my hand, "feels more real than any job title ever has." I don't think I said anything for a full minute. Just stared at him, trying to absorb the weight of what he was giving up, what he was choosing. And then I kissed him. Not like I was trying to say thank you, but like I was trying to tell him, "I'm here. I'm all in." The next morning, he made pancakes, from scratch. We didn't have the right ingredients, so he improvised, and they came out a little weird and flat. But he was shirtless and barefoot and humming to himself while flipping them, so I didn't care if they were burnt to a crisp. "You know this means we actually have to plan stuff now," I said between bites. "Like what?" "Trips, weekends, laundry schedules, whose turn it is to clean the bathroom. Real couple stuff," he grinned. "We've been doing that." "Yeah, but now it's on purpose." Ryan came over, leaned on the counter beside me. I liked the sound of that. I leaned in, brushing my mouth against his. Yeah. Later that afternoon, we went for a walk around the park near my building. The sun was out, kids running with kites, dogs chasing after sticks. It felt like a Sunday should feel. Like a breath you didn't realize you were holding. We sat on a bench in the shade, legs touching, his arm draped over the backrest behind me. He didn't pull me in, didn't force anything. I just leaned into him, naturally. And for the first time since I'd moved here, I didn't feel like a foreigner. Not in this city, not in this body, not in this life we were building. By the time autumn came, it felt like we'd always been this way. The heat softened. Tourists thinned out. The city seemed to breathe a little easier, and so did we. I'd wake up and find Ryan already making coffee, or he'd come back from his run and crawl into bed next to me, sweaty and smug, pressing cold fingers to my ribs just to make me squeal. He was still him. Sarcastic, messy, annoyingly good at picking the one restaurant I swore I hated and somehow convincing me it was my idea to try it again. But he was mine now, and I was his. We still hadn't labeled it, still hadn't done the "so what are we" conversation, but we didn't need to. People noticed, though. At work, at cafes, at language class. When we finally signed up together, there were looks. Some subtle, some not. One night, after someone made a stupid joke at a bar, Ryan got quiet on the way home. "You okay?" I asked as we walked down a narrow, cobblestone alley. "Yeah," he said, "just thinking." I waited. Then he stopped walking, turned to me. "Do you ever worry?" "About what?" "This," he said, motioning between us. "What people see, what they think." I looked at him. Really looked. And then I reached out and took his hand. "I care more about what you think," I said. "The rest? Let them look. He squeezed my fingers. You always make it sound easy. It's not. But you're worth it. He smiled, the tension slipping from his shoulders. Yeah, he said quietly. So are you. A few weeks later, we hosted a dinner at my apartment. Nothing fancy. Just a few coworkers, some friends we'd made through classes, a couple of expat neighbors. Everyone crammed into my tiny kitchen with mismatched chairs and too much wine. Ryan made his signature roast chicken that somehow always came out perfect. I made a salad no one touched. We argued about the playlist, then gave up, and just let it shuffle through our shared Spotify queue. At one point, I caught him across the room laughing with someone I didn't know well. His head thrown back, that laugh that came from his chest, eyes lighting up in the way they only did when he forgot to hold anything back. And it hit me. This was home now. Not just the city, but this version of life we'd carved out for ourselves. The little domestic rituals, the lazy Sundays, the way he stole the covers and left the cap off the toothpaste and still somehow made my whole world feel steady. After everyone left, we cleaned up in silence. The good kind of silence, the kind where you don't need to fill it. When we were done, we collapsed onto the couch, legs tangled, plates still soaking in the sink. I love you, I said without warning. I hadn't planned to say it, it just happened. He looked at me, and for a second I panicked. What if I'd misread it? What if I'd said too much? But then he leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. I've been waiting to say that, he whispered. Didn't want to mess it up. You couldn't. Still, he said, smiling. Feels good to get it out. We sat there like that for a long time. No plans, no expectations, just the quiet hum of a life we were building. Together. One night, much later, we walked through the city just after a rainstorm. The streets were slick with reflections. The sky, a bruised blue-gray. I slipped my hand into his pocket, and he didn't even flinch. We passed a small tourist shop with cheesy postcards and even cheesier souvenirs. I grabbed one with a cartoon matador and held it up. Think your parents would be thrilled to get this? He smirked. They'd think I was drunk, which is accurate. Then he turned to me, suddenly serious. You ever think about what happens if we leave here someday? I thought about it. About visas, contracts ending, the question of what comes next. I think, I said, that whatever city we end up in, I want it to be one you're in too. He nodded. Yeah, me too. A year later, we sat in the same airport we'd both arrived through, our bags packed for a trip home. Home. Ryan was scrolling through his phone, headphones in, mouthing the lyrics to some old indie song he insisted was timeless. I was pretending to read, but mostly just watching him. He caught me staring and smirked. You still looking at me like I'm gonna vanish? Maybe, I said. Just making sure you're real. He leaned over, pressed a quick kiss to my cheek. Still real. We were flying back to visit family, his first time back since the move, my second. It felt strange. Like we were ghosts returning to a life that no longer quite fit. I wasn't nervous about being back, but I was nervous about how much had changed in me since leaving, how much I had built here. Not just in Madrid, but in us. His parents were warm, curious, awkward, in the way you'd expect when someone brings home a partner they didn't know they had. They asked the usual questions: how we met, how the city was, what our plans were. And somewhere in between pouring wine and telling stories about our first flat that had mold in the walls, it hit me. We weren't explaining ourselves. We weren't justifying anything. We were just existing. Together. Ryan reached for my hand under the table that night, while his dad was telling a story about his first disastrous trip abroad, and I looked over and saw the same expression I'd seen that first night on my couch. That quiet, steady, I'm choosing this look, and I squeezed back. On our last night home, we stayed in a hotel, not because we had to, but because it felt symbolic. A pause before going back. A space just for us. We sat in bed, lights low, the room quiet except for the sound of the city outside. You ever think about how none of this was supposed to happen? I asked. Ryan turned on his side to face me. Yeah, all the time. I mean, we could have ended up in different cities, different jobs, different lives. He reached out and traced a line across my chest with his finger. But we didn't. No, I agreed. We didn't. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, sometimes I think about Berlin. I tensed, just a little. Yeah? Not because I wish I'd gone, he said quickly. Just because it would have been the easy option. I looked at him. And this, he smiled, this is the right one. I felt something loosen in me, some old fear that had still been clinging, even after all this time. You know what I think? I said. What? That we didn't move here for work. Not really. He raised an eyebrow. No. I think we moved here to find each other. Ryan leaned in, kissed me once, soft and slow. And I'm glad we did. Now, when people ask me why I moved to Spain, I still say it was for a job. It's easier than saying, because somewhere in my gut, I knew I was about to fall into the kind of love that would change everything. But I know the truth. And so does he. Because sometimes you move across the world for a reason you don't understand yet. And sometimes that reason is a person.